Hi, this is Michelle Cody from Cody Law, and I wanted to talk to you briefly about the adoption tax credit. If you're a current client, I'll probably go over this with you at the end of your adoption process, or we might send this video to you to review before or after the adoption process to make sure you get the information. So our office specializes in DCFS adoptions, guardianships, private adoptions, related child adoptions, and foreign readoption. So I'm going to talk to you about the adoption tax credit in the context of all of those types of adoptions. And I'm not offering any tax advice. I am not a tax attorney. This is really just for your information to make sure that when you talk to your accountant or your tax professional on preparing your tax returns, that they are able to assist you and you can make sure that you're working with someone that's knowledgeable about this area. This might be an instant you don't want to go to H&R Block this year or one of the other kind of chug and plug sort of tax preparers that you might want to talk to and adopt to a tax professional that's familiar with the rules, the IRS rules and regulations as it relates to the adoption tax credit. So each tax year, there has been a different eligibility amount for the tax year ending in 2024. The eligible income tax credit is $16,810 for each qualified child. So if you adopt a sibling group, then you are going to be eligible for that tax credit for each one of the children. There are certain eligibility requirements and certain types of adoptions that do not qualify, and certain types of adoptions that only qualify for a portion of that credit. The eligibility, there is an income cap for adoptive parents. If your income is above $292,150 as of the 2024 tax year, then you do not qualify and you're excluded from the tax credit. There are some from 252,000 up to that 292. There is a little sliding scale for the amount of the tax credit reduction that you would be eligible for. When you file, you do have to file married filing jointly. If you're married, there are rules as it relates to registered domestic partners. And so you want to talk to your tax professional if you're in one of those situations to see how you should file your return in order to get the maximum benefit of that tax credit. In order to be a qualifying child for the adoption tax credit, the child must be under the age of 18, or if they're over the age of 18, they must be physically and mentally incapable of self-care. So it is possible to receive the adoption tax credit if you adopt a disabled adult. The majority of people that are claiming this credit, though, are claiming it for minors who are under the age of 18 when they're adopted. For certain special needs adoptions, you get the full credit whether you have incurred those expenses or not. To qualify for a special needs adoption, the child has to be a U.S. citizen, not able to return to a parent's home, and unlikely to be adopted without assistance. So in the majority of cases, if you are adopting through DCFS, for even for a kinship related child or a traditional foster placement adoption, you are going to qualify as a special needs adoption and you are going to be eligible for the full tax credit whether or not the child whether or not you have incurred those total expenses. Most people that are adopting through foster care don't really have any adoption related expenses because DCFS covers those expenses or should cover those expenses. Now, if you are adopting through a private adoption, a private related child, or private domestic adoption, or an international adoption, you can claim the tax credit up to your qualified expenses. So what is a qualified expense for the adoption tax credit? Well, things like your home study fees, things like your adoption fees, your agency fees, the attorney fees for finalizing the adoption, the court costs for filing adoption process, Any expenses for getting like certified or apostilled copies of documents are going to be qualified expenses. Your travel expenses, including your meals and lodging for your adoption process, those are also considered qualifying expenses. And any expense that's directly related to the legal adoption process would be considered qualified expenses. You can sometimes ask your attorney through the adoption process if your tax professional is requesting it. If you talk to them prior to the finalization, they might ask for some type of a fee affidavit with the court. We're happy to prepare that if your tax professional is asking for it prior to the finalization of the adoption. Just let us know in advance so that we can have that prepared. Sometimes DCFS will have that, the agency will have that prepared for us. It's going to be zero for DCFS adoptions typically. But we can file that affidavit of expenses as a part of your adoption process. The things that don't qualify as qualified really adoptions for the tax credit. If you're adopting a stepchild, your spouse's child, you're not going to qualify for the tax credit. A grandparent can, if a grandparent is adopting a grandchild, but if your spouse is adopting your child, that does not qualify for the adoption tax credit. The adoption tax credit is not available for surrogacy or surrogate parent arrangements. This has to be an adoption process, not a surrogacy or a step parent adoption. If you have been reimbursed some of your expenses by your employer or through grants, those expenses would not qualify for the tax credits either. So talk to your tax professional about those. So your tax professional is going to help you determine how you get to claim the credit. Like I mentioned, if you are adopting through DCFS, more than likely that is going to be considered a special needs adoption, in which case you get the full tax credit and you don't have to show any qualifying expenses. For those other type of adoption tax credits for other adoption situations, you want to sit down with your accountant and show what grants you've received, what reimbursement you've received, and the expenses that you've incurred, and they will help you determine what that tax credit can be. So when can you claim the tax exemption, the tax credit? Definitely talk to your tax professional about that. For children that are adopted through the foster care system, you're going to claim that credit after the adoption is finalized. Same thing with foreign adoption. You're going to claim the credits after the adoption is finalized. There is some exceptions for domestic adoptions where you can claim some of those expenses throughout the adoption process, but your tax professional can help you through that. Now, if you have adopted your child privately and they have a special need, there are special rules that apply for that allow you to claim more of that adoption tax credit. When you do claim that tax credit, if you don't use the full credit, it will carry on for, I believe, another 5 years until you use up the full credit. So especially when you're adopting multiple children, oftentimes it's gonna zap your entire liability for that year, your tax liability, and you'll be able to carry any additional credit over to the next year. So it's a huge benefit that's able to offset some of those costs for adoptive families. And particularly for people that are adopting out of foster care or a special needs adoption, where we know that you're going to have some continuing expenses going forward for the children. This is a nice bonus for adoptive families, and we really encourage you to take advantage of it. So if you have any questions, you're always free. If you are not an existing client and you have questions about the adoption process, going to our website at www.cody-law.com, and you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation for new clients. If you are an existing client and have a question, you're always free to schedule an appointment to meet with me or one of our other staff members, or to shoot us an email or a message through Communicate. Thanks.